Hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a review of the BRIBEJAT BT3 smartwatch. Just before we get started, I wanted to say a big thank you to BRIBEJAT for sending over this watch and giving me the opportunity to review it for them. And before we go any further, thank you guys so much for 100 subscribers. It means a lot to me that you'd hit that subscribe button for me. But without further ado, let's get into the video and let's start off with what is inside the box. So inside the box, we have a proprietary charger. This kind of acts like a magnet charger. It snaps on. The box also includes obviously the watch itself and some user manuals. It's a pretty nice unboxing experience, but that's all it has. The BRIBEJAT BT2 had more bands, such as a nice leather one. This one doesn't have it, but it also cuts down on the cost a bit, because if you look on Amazon, this watch is actually cheaper than its predecessor, the BRIBEJAT BT2. And if at any point in this video you're interested in learning more about that watch, you can click the link in the description. Anyways, next up, design. As far as the design of the watch goes, it feels really premium and it has a nice heft to it. The band is also pretty nice. It has two little sliding rings on it that can keep the tail of the watch closely secured to the watch band. But one complaint with the band is, after a while of use, I think this metal hinge that they have on here, or clip that they have on, it slowly starts to rub the matte coating off the band, and you'll notice how it appears a little glossier than when you first get it. It's not a huge deal. You only really notice it if you take off the watch and have it sitting down, but it's something to note. The band definitely isn't quite as good as the BT2, but again, you can't really complain since they cut down on costs. The watch also has a nice tactile button on it. It has a pretty nice, satisfying click. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's also accompanied by an orange accent color, which I like. Now, as far as the screen goes, I never found the bezels on the watch intrusive, although they aren't the smallest in the world either. The BT2 smartwatch that BRIBEJAT also makes, it had like a metal dial around it, but that watch was a circular face, and that dial, it did a really good job of hiding what would otherwise be larger bezels. But as this watch has a squared off design, I don't think a dial would be very appropriate for it, and the lack of one actually keeps it sleek and nice. So me personally, I actually prefer a circular watch face design, kind of like this. So I thought I wouldn't really like the squared off design too much, but surprisingly enough, it's actually grown on me very well. Overall, I feel like I'd rate the design a 9 out of 10. Although, like I said, the bezels aren't intrusive. The more you can slim them down, the more premium the watch is gonna look. But yeah, no complaints as far as design goes. Now let's move on to the performance of the watch. This watch actually performs pretty well. Swiping through the widgets feels very fluid and responsive. The only slight gripe I have with the performance of the watch is when you go to the app menu, where you can see all the apps laid out. When you swipe around really fast, you can kind of know the display has a low refresh rate, but if you're not a weirdo like me and rubbing your finger across it as fast as you can, then you won't really notice it, I don't think so. You can't really complain too much. In this section, I also want to talk about the battery life. Now, the battery life on this watch seems pretty good, but it also varies a lot depending on what you're doing. For example, if I'm doing a lot of workouts and stuff, it drains pretty fast, but if you're just kind of using it casually, like checking the time, maybe the weather, notifications, you really shouldn't have to charge it up too much. I would say you might be able to get 3 or 4 days without charging it. It ultimately really depends on what you're doing though. But when you think about it, that battery life is actually pretty good, because if you look at the more high-end options like a Galaxy Watch or an Apple Watch, you'll find that you have to charge those pretty much every day. So considering this watch is under $50, it's pretty crazy that it can outperform some of the high-end options on the market. So now, let's talk about the UI of the watch. Now, I think this is one of the highlights of the watch because the menus are very clear and easy to navigate. All you need to do is swipe left from the main face to get to your widgets, or in my opinion, the better way is to swipe right from the main face, which leads you to a menu of apps like you'd see on an Apple or Galaxy Watch. This menu is a very nice addition to this watch, as it removes the hassle of sweeping through all the widgets just to get to the one you want, and instead lets you see all the icons laid out in front of you, so you can easily and quickly select what you want to select. Now let's get on to the features and the tests of them, because this watch is pretty feature packed. but that doesn't mean anything if the features it has don't work well. Alright, as far as using this watch as a fitness tracker, the exercise modes on this watch are very good and extensive, from weightlifting to swimming. Speaking of swimming, this watch is actually waterproof. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you can swim in the pool with it and log your exercises. I personally wouldn't if I don't have to, because one thing you'll find is when you're using the watch underwater, the display doesn't quite work correctly. But even if you don't wear it in the pool, I feel like the peace of mind if you have to wear it out in the rain or someone pushes you in the pool is enough to really be excited about the waterproof feature. But just a disclaimer on the website, it does say that you shouldn't be in water over 100 degrees with it on, so you might not want to take a shower with it or something. Boy, all this talk about temperature actually reminds me, this watch comes with a forecast feature where it tells you the weather temperature along with whether it's going to be cloudy, rainy, windy, and even better, it gives you an entire 6-day forecast. And if it's connected to your phone, it'll even send you little pings of the current temperature and weather, which is pretty nice if checking the weather isn't at the top of your agenda. And speaking of notifications, it's basically everything you would expect from a smartwatch. It'll give you a little buzz, like I just got now, and then it lets you receive texts, it lets you know if someone's calling you, which you can make calls on the watch, by the way. We'll get a little bit more into that later. So basically, any notification you'd get on your phone, it goes straight through the watch and lets you know about it so you don't have to pull out your phone. So as I mentioned earlier, similar to the BT2 before it, it comes with a phone call function. So you can answer the phone straight from your wrist. If you want to go out into public and be talking like a Star Trek person, this is the watch for you. So you'll get the caller ID and the ability to answer or decline it right on the watch face if someone calls you, and that's actually really handy if a scene kind of like this plays out often. Now, we touched on fitness tracking features a little bit earlier, but the watch also has your typical health monitoring stuff, such as you're able to check your heart rate, your blood oxygen. It also comes with a sleep tracker so you can see how your sleep has been, you can check your sleep score and stuff like that, and I actually personally find that info pretty interesting to look at and can help diagnose if you maybe are feeling tired in the mornings. It also has a step counter and a distance tracker, so in other words, the watch does a pretty good job of telling you how lazy you've been. Now, this watch also has a lot of time-related features. It has timers, stopwatches, and alarm clocks if you need to use them at any point, and in my lifestyle, those features actually come in handy quite frequently for me. Now, honestly, one of my biggest complaints is its timer function. Now, the reason I'm putting so much focus on this is when you go to set a timer, for example, say you need a 5-minute timer, you can do that. You can do that just fine. But if you need to set a more specific timer, like just for example, say you need like a 3 or 7 minute timer, the watch actually limits you to a selection of timers rather than just being able to input your own time. And I sure hope they would be able to fix that with a software update or something, because that is really frustrating. But at the end of the day, it's just a timer, and out of the whole watch, I would say that's the most annoying thing about it, so I don't think it's really a deal breaker. So now I want to get into the display of the watch itself. The screen is great. It's a pretty high resolution, so when you're using their built-in watch faces, they look pretty clear and there's no complaints with those. I do notice that sometimes with your own custom watch faces, like if you set a wallpaper or something, the lines will be a little pixely, but I don't think that's a resolution issue, but more so a file transfer between the app and the watch issue. But the screen is actually really bright and it's pretty colorful too, so even if you're outdoors, you can see it very well. So even though it's not AMOLED or OLED, which I think would make a great addition to the next watch in the lineup, it's still pretty good and there's really no complaints about the screen. Now, switching gears to the app, I think this is one of the biggest improvements over the last watch they made, which is the BRIBEJAT BT3 smartwatch. The whole layout of the app is so much more aesthetically pleasing, and it's a lot more straightforward as well. It's really easy to navigate compared to their old one. So when you go to the main page of the app, you'll see your widgets, such as your sleep widget, which shows your sleep range from REM to deep, and you can see other health-related widgets there. And while we're speaking of the app, this is also where you can customize your watch faces. And in my opinion, this watch has a much better selection of good faces than the BT2 did. And I also noticed how they're actually updating it in real time. I recently looked at the app's watch face selection, and it was a lot bigger than the first time I had looked at it when I first got the watch. And a nice thing about this watch is the analog faces have a sweeping hand animation, which makes a really big difference in the aesthetics of the watch. Their watch face selection also includes some nice animated watch faces, such as this animated velociraptor carrying an egg, which is honestly one of my favorites to use. Now, if you're like me and you enjoy saying your own pictures as watch faces, you can still do it with this watch, but I have one slight issue. When it comes to the placement of the time, you can't place the time in the middle of the face or either of the corners on the left side, so you can only place it on the top right or the top left of the watch, which is a pretty weird choice considering the watch's form factor is a square one, and in my opinion that should mean it would have a bigger array of places you can put the time on the watch face as opposed to a circular display. Now, I'm not sure if this could be fixed in a software update, but I really hope it can be, because although again it's not really a deal breaker, it's just a minor annoyance. Now, before we end the review, I just wanted to touch on the BT2 versus their newer BT3. Now, there's a lot of pros and cons to each one, like when you compare them to each other, such as the BT2 has an MP3 player, so if you think you can make use of having an MP3 player built into your watch that you can connect your headphones to or whatever, then you might want to take a look at that watch. But if having the forecast is an important thing to you, then I'd recommend the BT3 to you. If you're interested in the BT2, definitely make sure to check out my video on it, that way you can kind of compare the pros and cons for yourself and decide which one you want to go with. So in conclusion, I think the BRIBEJAT BT3 smartwatch is a very good choice if you're in the market for a budget smartwatch. It has a slew of great features, but it also has some minor caveats, but it's really hard to reach perfection in a watch at the price you're paying for it. So yeah, I think it definitely gets my approval, and I am confident recommending it out to you. But if you're a little skeptical, again, definitely check out that review on the BT2. Again, huge thanks to BRIBEJAT for sending it over, and thank all of you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.